everyone, it's a big week. Unreal Engine 425 is now available with a host of new and enhanced features across the board. 425 arrives with support for Sony's PlayStation 5 and Microsoft's Xbox Series X. Unreal Insights has been improved and expanded to include networking. The battle-tested Niagara VFX system is now production-ready, and the Chaos Physics and Destruction system has seen significant improvements. To help you produce high-quality movies and stills, you'll gain access to a brand new media output pipeline, a slew of new audio features, and ray tracing is also now production-ready. Dive into the release notes for a full list of changes and download 425 today. In addition to a ton of new features in the engine, May's free marketplace content has arrived. Get behind the wheel of VR-ready drivable cars, warp models in and out with a VFX collection, build bustling metropolises using over 350 game-ready meshes, go face-to-face with a high-quality sci-fi robot, and stay on target with a plug-and-play solution for directional targeting. Visit the Unreal Engine Marketplace to download them all. Or creatives save time and undue stress by automating the stylized aesthetic of Ira Act 1 Pilgrimage, an upcoming atmospheric adventure. As a solo developer, Zachary needed to find a way to simplify Ira's development and make the most of his limited resources. Learn more about his automated pipeline and power your own projects with Editor Utility Widgets using his guide. From Power Rangers to Pac-Man, there's no shortage of iconic franchises under the umbrella of BANDAI NAMCO Entertainment. The team continually looks to evolve its franchises and foster creativity while striving to serve its fans with compelling content that carries on the torch of legendary titles such as Tekken, Soul Calibur, and Ace Combat. Earlier this year, we were lucky enough to catch up with the Bandai Namco Entertainment team in Japan, and in our spotlight, they break down how Unreal Engine has altered their content creation pipeline and helped them build upon the legacies of these storied gaming franchises. With a goal of automating long-distance freight transportation in partnership with the trucking industry, Silicon Valley-based automation company Ike is developing a virtual simulator by building on Unreal Engine's out-of-the-box AI and simulation features. Learn more about Ike's hybrid approach to simulation and why they're in it for the long haul on the Unreal Engine blog. As always, a special thanks to our top weekly Karma earners who are being rock stars on Answer Hub. Clockwork Ocean, Mindsurf Dev, Everynone, Bino, Bama Game, T. Sumisaki, Xia, Curso, In Russell, and Crewdimer. Now over to our incredible community creators. This gorgeous cinematic you see here is called Renegade Hardware. As if it weren't impressive enough, this is Voltron Jones's first attempt at creating a short in Unreal Engine. Now, they do have a background in film, but it's still fantastic work, and we encourage you to head to the forums and give them your feedback. Next up, we have a stunning configurator. The interactive visualizer lets users explore virtual rooms to help them get a sense of the space while swapping different materials. Head over to the forums and share your thoughts with the team at Derule Solutions. Last up is a beautiful still life by Dimitri Whitman called Nature Morte. Dimitri used free Megascans assets to assemble the scene and staged it to experiment with ray tracing. See this and more of Dimitri's work on their ArtStation page. Thanks for watching this week's News and Community Spotlight.
Hi everyone and welcome to Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore and celebrate everything Unreal. I'm your host Victor Broden, and with me today I have a crew of very merry guests from Sumo Digital. Can I please welcome Nick Cosworth, lead game designer from Sumo Digital. We also have Mick Hurst, the lead environment artist.
Hello.
As well as Chris Downey, art manager, and last but not least, Brendan Burns, the lead programmer. Welcome to the show.
Hi there.
Thank you.
Hi.
We are here to talk a little bit about your Apple Arcade game Spyder. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
And yeah, please go ahead, Nick. I was going to lead over to you.
No, that's fine. So I'm not sure how many people watching the stream are familiar with Spyder, so we could do a little bit of a kind of a brief update on what it is.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'll share my screen. Okay, you guys can see that okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Cool. So Spyder is an adventure puzzle game for Apple Arcade, and you take on the role of the world's smallest robot secret agent named Agent 8. Essentially, it's a spy game where you play the gadget. What's unique about the game is that Agent 8 is able to navigate the levels in full 360 degrees. That means you can walk on the floor, the walls, and the ceiling, all without the effects of gravity. He also has a whole bunch of different gadgets that you can use to solve the game's many problems and puzzles, as well as a few basic abilities like pick up and push. It's a little hard to explain what the game is. So a lot of the times when you say, oh, it's a bit like this game mixed with that game, we really struggled with that throughout development. It's kind of got a few elements of things like Super Mario Galaxy and maybe a puzzle game like The Room, but it's not really either of those games. And hopefully by the time we get to the end of the stream, you'll have a better idea of what Spyder is and who Agent 8 is. So here's some screenshots from the game. This is Agent 8. These are some of the gadgets that he's got, like a web splat. This is him using a computer via a trackball. Here's some of the sort of 360 walking on the wall kind of stuff. And so today in this presentation, we're going to try and take you through everything from day 0 right through to where we are now. We just released about 7 weeks ago. So how the game's done, how we've handled the game post-release, and also all of the journey we took along the way to make the game. So I guess we should start at the beginning. So Sumo has sometimes bi-yearly game jams. We've been really successful with them. There was a game we made called Snake Pass, which was also done on Unreal, which was a game jam winner, and that went on to be a full product. And Spyder is kind of the second game jam winner to make it to be a published title. So this is original IP that people in the studio develop. They're gracious enough to show off their ideas. It's kind of meant to be over 2 days, but really it's a little bit more like people's noodles that we've been doing at home. You know, they kind of bring them into the studio and people get to see them, people get to play them. It's a very friendly competition. And at the end of the day, the whole studio plays the games and we kind of have a little voting booth, and people get different awards for different categories. And Spyder, or as it was known, I think 8-legged project at the time, was one of those projects. So I think we've got some video. I'll stop sharing. I think we've got some video we can show of the game
I'll
jam.
go ahead and play now.
So having seen a few shots of what the game looks like at release, this is very, very different looking. It was put together by 3 guys, Luke, Naj, and Ricky. And they were trying to just explore this idea of complete navigation of a world in complete 360 degrees. As you can see, the legs are kind of procedural and they freak out a little bit. It's also got 8 legs, which is something that our final Spyder did not have. But this was really the sort of the genesis of the idea. People really resonated with the idea of playing a spider, being able to climb up the walls and explore an environment in a completely different way. So on winning the game jam, not all winners are taken forward as ideas. Sometimes there'll be a really nice idea that someone comes up with, but it's just not really commercially viable. So we have an internal team that judges all of the content that we're thinking about publishing for viability, and everybody saw the potential of Spyder. So it was taken forward. And development on it started really in about sort of mid to late 2008, I think.
18.
Sorry, go on. Chris, did you want to say something? No. Okay. So what happens when a game goes from game jam through the committee and then into a small team? Well, it goes into kind of a concept development phase. So I'll share my screen again. So there was a few ideas put forward. I think there was like a fantasy one. There was kind of this mirror world one. Very early on, there was this concept of it being a spy game and you being kind of this tiny little microscopic spider that could go anywhere and be naturally stealthy due to your size. So these are some early concepts for the main character, Agent 8, that were put together by our UI artist, Craig. Some of this stuff obviously didn't make it into the game, so we don't have a laser cannon on Agent 8's back. Here's one with a drone. Here's one kind of interacting with the world and trying to plug something in. This is an idea of hanging onto a bomb that falls out of a plane. If anybody's played the game, we'll see that that idea continued through.
I think one of the really interesting things about these images as well is that it shows that what we were trying to give in these pictures was a kind of character to the character, rather than, you know, the game jam thing that's just a ball, a creepy ball with the spiky legs. So yeah, it was really interesting to kind of discover what the main player was and what kind of personality he had.
Yeah, and very early on, the decision was made to kind of not go with the 8 legs. We're really aware of arachnophobic players, and some of the people who saw that original Game Jam demo just had to leave the room. And you'll see as we show some of the videos of how the character developed, he was still pretty creepy for quite a long time. So trying to get to a character that didn't trigger kind of arachnophobic fears was one of the big challenges for this character. But the response has been fantastic. Even like quite a few reviews have said, I hate spiders, but I love this spider. So I think we did a really great job in trying to sort of soften the look of a more traditional sort of 8-legged, beastly looking spider and turn it into a kind of cute Pixar-y kind of character. So here's a few more pictures of just like motion ideas. Not many of these stuck. You can see early on, there's still very much a concept that this was kind of almost an organic spider, but just robotic. We really moved away from that idea to make him much more of a spy gadget rather than trying to be a recreation of a spider and shoot web and things like that. And this was kind of the concept piece, I think, that really sold everybody on the idea of the game being this sort of late 60s Cold War spy drama. So the game's set in this sort of optimistic version of the late 60s where technology's pushed a little bit, but not too far. And there's this kind of optimism and this sort of dream of technology saving the world. We call it retromantic. So it's kind of looking back at the past in a sort of romanticized vision of what the future would be back then. And this was kind of the first image, I think, that really kind of got that idea across.
Yeah, for sure. It's and it was all to do with the shape language of that kind of imagery and the kind of tones within the images as well, which kind of really helps sell that that point in time and that vision of the future from a moment in the past. It's quite an interesting thing.
Yeah, I think it definitely makes the game stand out in the marketplace because it's kind of realistic. I mean, we have things like, you know, these big data tapes in old mainframes, and we have kind of old computer systems and trackballs and things like that. So there's kind of touch points for real world things that existed but have now passed and been superseded by modern technology. But it's all still kind of familiar if you've ever seen an old Bond movie, or, you know, it's particularly like the Sean Connery late 60s stuff. And this is some concepts for some early environment tests. Again, this is really kind of setting the style maybe Chris, you can talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, and also playing on the kind of spy tropes of, you know, a lava base or an underwater base or a moon base. Again, it kind of harks back to those early James Bond movies and the kind of typical locations that you would see. Even, you know, the parodies in Austin Powers. It's all that kind of stuff that we were drawing as inspiration, really. And these very, very early sketches were was all trying to kind of set that tone and set that mood and that feel and getting across that kind of that old-fashioned vision of the future.
For sure. So moving on from that, an initial demo was put together. So sorry if I keep jumping back and forth between sharing my screen, but hopefully we can keep up. So an initial demo was put together. The team for this, Chris, do you remember how big the team was roughly for this?
In terms of the art team, I think there was art director, there was a lead environment artist, and then I think there was just two support artists in terms of environments, and they knocked this out in a very short period of time. It was literally a couple of months from beginning to end. Yeah, it was quite impressive what they did in a short space of time. And I remember it. I wasn't on the project at the time, but I was within their room, and I remember seeing it coming alive and sort of being really excited by the imagery and the kind of style that they were coming up with. And the interesting thing was sort of trying to take that style from the images that you shared earlier, Nick, and almost put that then into a 3D setting, a 3D world, and how did those shapes and the object style and the design of the computers and the CRT monitors and the kind of wood textures of that time, how that sort of came across, but felt lively and vibrant at the same time, colorful.
Yeah.
And it was really nice to see that coming alive. They did a really, really good job of setting the tone, which helped, you know, when we actually kind of move forward.
Yeah, we've got some video, I think, of this, but we can play.
What I was going to mention as well, Nick, is that the makeup of the original team from the Game Jam. So Ricky Papagno, Luke Thurkel, and Najor Lee, they're all designers. So they didn't have any code support at that point. And I think even in this demo, the Spyder is all Blueprint at this point.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So again, you know, I mean, just putting that in context, though, when people are seeing this, that, you know, there's quite a lot of functionality.
I mean, I think that's
in Blueprint.
Just an evolution of the Blueprint Spyder that won the Game Jam. So you can see this kind of a start of a little bit of a look change. The legs are still really long.
I'll go ahead and play the video.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the PC demo. It's got a lot of similarities with the game that we released. This level, in kind of a different form, is in the final game. But in terms of how the character works, it's so completely different. This is still all procedurally built, still all in blueprints. There's quite a lot of different design changes. The legs are, as you can see, really, really long, and a little bit uncontrollable as well. Also kind of walks like a crab. So the controls were completely different. You know, you could strafe, but because this was on a PC, it was very much built around dual sticks. But a lot of the assets you're seeing in this demo from mid 2008 ended up in the final game. It's kind of weird to go back and look at this because it's different but so familiar at the same time.
Yeah, it looks great. I think because I started I'm Michael Hursty, Mick Hursty, lead environment artist. I started after this was done, but this was a great starting point from an environment point of view, because a lot of the things are identified, you know, the look and how the game's, you know, appears on screen. There's also things like the depth of field to enhance the Spyder scale, because it is supposed to be a tiny spider in a big environment, and subtle things like the outline shader and just the material, the way the materials look as well. So this was all things which were on a PC demo, which we could try and then work out how to get this onto the mobile platform, which we can sort of touch on later on. But I think Unreal definitely helped, make that transition, a lot easier. And it was very successful, I thought.
I mean, you can see the Spyder's kind of struggling with some shapes, and that's something that you'll also see during production, but that was a big challenge for us. It's very difficult to have a character that can walk, kind of like has to place all 6 legs at the same time. It's and being procedural, there was issues with that, in that it was very difficult to override with animation. So we knew ultimately, as production started, that was something that we were going to move away from. But sort of next, after that demo, basically we showed it to a few people, and Apple were really, really interested in the product, and they signed the game. So a larger team was put together, and then there was some initial prototypes put together. We can probably just go straight onto the video for those.
Play now.
So this is a slightly larger team. But again, if anyone's played the game, you'll start to see things that are somewhat familiar, even though this is again late 2008, I believe this all was. We sometimes feel like we went really quite far away from some of the initial stuff, but then when you look at it with hindsight, and you see some of the stuff that we haven't seen, so we were like digging through the archives to find all this stuff, and we hadn't seen it in such a long time. But actually, there's a load of stuff in there that's kind of has made it into the game. Not necessarily levels, like this is kind of a lava level, but ideas for crawl space.
Ideas and snippets of gameplay for sure. Yeah.
I mean, here's the train, and that this level did end up in the game, not in that form, but we did do a train level. And this idea of being in these confined crawl spaces and in the engines of things, all of this stuff kind of permeated through to the final game.
This was really interesting, this stage, actually, from an environment and almost level design point of view. That one of the main things that we were trying to understand at this time was what is Spyder space, trying to determine how big a level was. How big did the space need to be for engaging gameplay? And we went through so much iteration with this. We had some really large spaces. We had some spaces that were too small. We had issues where the camera couldn't cope with certain spaces, and all of that kind of stuff we had to work through. But it was a really, really interesting time. And actually, Nick, in terms of the art team size from the PC demo to this stage was the same.
Right.
What I remember changing though was the design support around us. The design team grew, and we started getting level designers on board, and the two disciplines were working closely together to kind of come up with these spaces, and we'd pair people up, and we'd do little prototypes of gameplay, little tiny puzzles, just to kind of figure out what worked and what didn't, and not only from a gameplay perspective, but also from a visual perspective and a what looks good in the distance, what looks good up close, what are the kind of rule sets for these spaces that we're creating. And we spent a good amount of time constantly churning through trying to answer these questions. And being honest, we didn't get there fast. It was such a unique game, and like you touched on earlier, there was nothing really that we could compare to. So it was at times it was an interesting time. Trying to resolve all of that, and obviously some things are very subjective as well. So some people would like larger spaces, some people would like smaller spaces. So it was just trying to work out what we wanted for the game, really.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot going on at this time. So obviously there was exploration into the spaces, but also exploration into what the character could do. Given the early concepts of having the gadgets, that wasn't really prevalent in some of the early prototypes. So that was something that the design team needed to explore. So really sort of defining the limits and defining the abilities of Agent 8 as a character, and then also trying to work out what space that character could occupy to be an engaging experience was also A lot of that stuff was going on at that time. The problem was that even though it might not seem like it in late 2008, the deadline for the project was looming. So we had to hit a March 2020 deadline. So going into production in sort of October 2008, that's kind of just under a year and a half. Is that my math being terrible? But seems like it. But we also knew that we were pretty much going to throw away everything that we'd made up to that point because we didn't want to go with procedural Spyder. We had to make sure all of this stuff was going to be working on a range of different Apple devices. So the decision was made to kind of just reboot and start again. And I think the next stuff that we've got to show is probably some of the really early character development. So
I'll go ahead and play. Oh, okay, slide. Here we
it's
go.
Okay. I mean, so during this phase, really it was about transitioning the Spyder over from being this procedural blueprint-driven character into this skeletal IK-based character. And yeah, we can take a look at some of the videos for that, and you can see it seems to take a massive backward step.
I'm playing the video.
Yeah, so this, I don't know what to say really about it. I mean, going from everything that you'd seen, where there was a really nice art style defined. The character was kind of really quite a fluid character, even though it was a little bit crazy with the procedural stuff. To then sort of taking this massive step backwards to try and get the character to work as a code object, but also like using the sophisticated IK system. So this is kind of early January stuff. I mean, Nick Edwards did a lot of this early stuff, if I'm not wrong, Brendan.
But yeah, I mean, this is, for me, this is beautiful. I don't know what you guys are talking about. How this being a step back. This is 1,000 steps forward because it's far more efficient. And I mean, if you just watch as he's walking forward and back, left and right, that's a mighty fine IK. So that's yeah, hats off to, I think that team was our IK guys, Nick Edwards, Andy Chapman, Andy Brown were all kind of at this problem. I mean, that was one of the points that I was gonna come in on. Nick was pretty much in between the last two videos and the effective reboot. I think that's pretty much where Mike Welsh, who was one of the code leads on Spyder, he kind of set up the code teams to address specific problems that had surfaced. So it was a case of, okay, well, we kind of had a core team of camera controls, and there's another one called 3C's character. And then the gadgets. So, I mean, there was this kind of evolving spec of, well, what will these spy solving tools be? And that was Steve Keen's team for the gadgets team, and that was Dan Millward, Steve Keen, Andy Ware. And there was just there was these kind of strike teams to solve very specific issues that had emerged. And you can kind of see where, as we go through the rest of these videos, where all of that ground.
It was really interesting up to this point as well, because that blueprint Spyder had sort of, as we had gone through that early phase of development and we had added more and more things that it could do, it just became really complicated, really inefficient in terms of runtime. And then it was, I guess, a really tough job trying to strip that back, dissect everything that was in that, and then almost rewrite it from scratch. Yeah, it was a really interesting time. Because from an environment and level point of view, we were desperate to try and crack on with these spaces that we wanted to develop, but we were like, but we've got this old Spyder that we know that we're throwing away. What do we do? Do we wait? Do we keep going, knowing that we might need to change some of this stuff that we're doing, dependent on how this code Spyder works out? It was a real crunch point, really.
It was. I mean, we still weren't even sure how we were going to do the controls for the game, sort of moving to touchscreen. We tried many different things. So that second part of that video was a touch to move experiment. So we did try that at one point. We just found that made it even harder to navigate these sort of 360-degree spaces because it's hard to touch the ceiling, so you're constantly just doing this tap around the environment to try and get anywhere. So that was really unsatisfactory. We tried a bunch of different stuff because one of the things that we were trying to get away from was the sort of, we felt a bit of a lazy solution, which was dual sticks. Ultimately, we went with a single stick and had sort of some loose camera control. We had to change that at launch, but we'll get to that. So we spent a lot of time experimenting with how to make this game work on a touchscreen device, because it's a difficult game to make when you've got a traditional controller, and then you give a sort of a non-traditional input method. It sort of compounds the problem, and you have to come up with really creative solutions on how to make that work. So all of this was kind of going on in the background. So art was still trying to push forward and define the look of the game. Design, we're trying to work out what spaces worked and what the character could do. And the next thing we had to do was a milestone called the vertical sliver. Actually, I've got some concept art of Agent 8 I can probably show at this point. Let me.
Yeah, because this was at the same time that we were going into the code version of the Spyder, was when we were starting to actually develop the look of the character himself.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was the art director working really closely with a concept artist. What we wanted to do was to keep the recognizable look of the original prototype version, but jazz him up, give him more personality, make it that the art style had evolved a little bit over that time as well. So it was about making sure that he still fitted with that, made sure that he was less spindly, more friendly looking. We wanted to get the emotions in there. We also wanted to make him a feasible mechanical device as well. So yeah, the shot up there of the legs and how they would move and how the joints work, that's the kind of detail that we went into when designing this thing. We wanted it to look like it was feasible and you could actually make this thing, even though he was really, really tiny. But yeah, it took a good month or so, I say, to sort of flesh all of this stuff out. But the art director had a really solid vision initially, so that actually wasn't that huge amount of time. But yeah, we got that all concepted, we got that out of the way, we knew what he was going to look like, and then it was a case of waiting for the code Spyder to come along and then start replacing like the really low detail mesh with a nice high-res one that we were doing.
Yeah, so again, this was all happening kind of in parallel. We had all of these different streams happening in parallel at the same time. And all of that stuff kind of had to come together a little bit earlier than we hoped for.
I think one of the actual really other interesting points actually to touch on with the development of Agent 8 was that it was also done in conjunction with our animator Griff, and also the rigger that was working on the team, James, because it was really important that they understood and they had involvement in the development of his character, because they needed to understand and communicate across what they wanted to do from an animation standpoint to bring this thing to life. So this was very much, everybody had input to kind of get this guy to where he was, and to sell him within the game as well as we could. And we took everybody's expertise there, and the animation of him is great. We've got the IK stuff for when he's just walking around, but when he switches to his idols, when he's just stood around, or when there's any kind of bespoke animation, there's some really, really interesting stuff. And we absolutely maxed out the amount of bones that we could use in a character to make sure that this guy really, really sung.
Yeah, so all of this stuff was happening in parallel. Designers were trying to work out what the spaces were that our character was going to occupy. We were also trying to work out what the Spyder could do. Code, we're in the process of converting the blueprint Spyder over to code, and the look of Agent 8 was being developed at the same time. And then one of the things the next milestone was something called vertical sliver. And this was an attempt to try and bring all of that stuff together at a very early stage. And this was really one of the big pain points for the project, because nothing was really ready. But what we do have is we have some video of this. So we can probably take a look at that video and kind of talk over about sort of some of the challenges that we were facing. So this milestone, we still had the blueprint Spyder. Work was still happening. It was still going on to kind of improve the blueprint Spyder, because we knew there would be this transition period. So we were trying to, in parallel, get the characters to still be a usable character for design to be prototyping with. I think this has now got the addition of the aerials, but you can still see the legs are incredibly long on this character. So some of this footage is still being used. And actually the parachute open was part of the Apple Arcade announcement. So that was our little 2 seconds of glory on the initial trailer. So this is a level in a cable car. And originally this level was... I
haven't seen this for a while.
Yeah. This level was a lot longer.
I haven't seen this for ages.
Yeah, it was a lot longer than what we ended up submitting as a milestone. There was kind of these whole sections inside the cable car which just were not working. But I mean, the big takeaway from this was, as painful as this milestone was to put together for everybody, it really helped define what we didn't want to do with the game. Even though some of this stuff, kind of this early section, is a little bit like what's in the current game, it was kind of all of the stuff that we cut out from this milestone, which is a significant amount of work, which made us realize that we were maybe going down the wrong path on a few of these ideas. And it sort of speaks to how difficult the process of making a game level that you can navigate in full 360 degrees at a tiny scale and still have the Spyder in recognizable human environments was. That's a really difficult challenge.
That was the biggest challenge that we had, certainly from an environment art and level design point of view, was understanding how small this guy was, but also making the spaces recognizable at a human to a human sort of perspective. And we explored all kinds of spaces within this level, the kind of cavities between little sections that a human wouldn't normally go to, but then they kind of didn't have a huge amount of meaning. And yeah, it was a really, really interesting time of discovery.
I think as well, because previous to this, I think the environment team, Declan, Simon and Harry, were working in conjunction with design on separate levels. But I think this one was basically the whole team kind of merged onto this one level, didn't it, for the milestone. So also we had, I think this was the first time when our Studio India team really linked up as well with the environment guys in Sheffield as well. So that was led by Ian. So it was all everybody working towards this one thing. So there was lots of things going off at once. I was saying, there was lots of things that you don't see in this demo. I think there was some kind of crawl spaces, which were actually look really, really good. But unfortunately, it was ended up on the cutting room floor. But it was a lot, like Nick was saying, it was a very good learning experience. I think we came out of this, knowing probably learning more, not what to do, rather than actually to what we should be doing. So so it was a really good experience overall.
And I think just in terms of the camera, this is probably a good video to kind of just pay or see some evolution of previous videos have just shown the camera pretty much as a fixed point behind the Spyder and following it along. So being very Spyder relative. And and that evolves, the feedback for, as the guy said, is when you're crawling around environments with that style of follow cam, something was getting lost.
For sure.
So
and even just sort of some of the interactions here, we were trying like swipe drags and different things like that, and nothing ever really felt tactile enough, and that was one of the things that we really wanted to really wanted to get the player to feel like this is a really tactile environment. So in the final game, there's a lot of, if you're unscrewing something, you actually do like the unscrew motions, things like that. If you're cutting out a panel, you actually trace the cut and things like that. So this was a painful part of the project, but it again really helped set us on a different path. We really knew that we needed to explore different kinds of spaces.
It's true, Nick, the thing that struck me actually was the briefcase puzzle that was just shown on the video. I remember that at the time, and playing on like the smallest screen devices, doing some of those interactions as we wanted to do them. It was so small on screen, and you couldn't see what you were doing, and your finger was obscuring stuff. So we learned an awful lot about what we needed to do to kind of make that an enjoyable experience, for sure, both from a design and an art point of view. And again, the cameras sort of come into that as well, because we needed to make sure that we were closer in on things. And then there was the balance of still understanding the space around you at the same time. So there's a lot of lessons learned there.
I think as well, under the hood as well. So Wayne, the lighting artist, this was the first real test because we basically used tile materials with light baking, so baking shadows, and this was the first kind of real test for that as well in a live environment. So again, we developed a lot of things from that, I think, because there's certain amounts of GI bounce baked into the level, which you kind of just see. But I think as the game progressed, I think Wayne became more, he was able to tune that more by inserting bounce cards and stuff to make the most of the GI and the bounce and the lighting and stuff. So that was this kind of the first instance of a full lighting pass, which was then continually developed through the game. And also Pete and the VFX team, this was their kind of first entry as well into putting the visual effects into the game as well. So all these things just came together for this one particular demo, which again informed the rest of the development.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, it's probably not as bad in hindsight as it felt like when we were making it, because it's kind of there are a few sort of things in there that we naturally evolved on from, the art pipeline is one of them in particular. And it's important to mention that, so that was running on an iPad. We recorded that a couple of days ago. So we dug out the old milestone, and that was running on an iPad. So back in sort of March, we were still running at a really nice frame rate, and still sort of, hitting our target devices fairly well. And that's even with the Blueprint Spyder.
And we had a full sort of PVR pipeline as well. Rich Richter, the tech artist on the project, did an amazing job sort of understanding the limitations of what shaders we could use and complexity of shaders. So you're right, this was the first time, really, this was the first milestone where we actually got anything that was the look and feel that we were after actually on device. Up until that point, everything was working towards that, but wasn't delivery of that. And this was the first time. And like Mick said earlier, we had all of the environment artists were working on that one level. Which is something that we then changed moving forward. But we can talk about that later. But yeah, there were a lot of people concentrating on this one thing to try and nail what the technical limitations were. Originally,
it was only meant to be a beautiful corner as well. I think it was only really meant to be the navigation down the arm and that little bit before the cutting. But we ended up having to kind of art up a lot more than we thought, and a lot of stuff that got cut, as Mick was saying, but was really nice in the sort of the innards and the crawl spaces of the level. But no one will see it. So after that, we were still kind of all working in parallel. And the 3Cs team were busy working on the abilities for Agent 8 as well. So that's the IK, that's the controls, that's the camera, things like the gadgets. And this was a lot of work on design. A lot of it was done by Luke, who was one of the original Game Jam team. So he was on the project for the entirety. So he was part of a Game Jam team and then part of a production team as well. And I think we've got some videos of this as well that we can take a look at and
I'll play the
sort of see some of the early development work for Agent 8.
So I think this is the first time that there's some of the gadgets from Steve Keen's team actually in representative functionality, where you can see, for example, the screwdriver tool. And this entire level is pretty much where all of Code put in their newest toys, gadgets, and gizmos for people to just strip back and see in their native form. And yeah, I can see the mouse cursor as well. Yeah. So
interestingly enough, as well, Brendan, this is also the first iteration of the implementation of the final version of Agent 8 post his concept getting locked down. He hasn't got the spindly legs anymore. He's got the body with the gadgets coming out. All that had been concepted, and this was the very first early iteration of the proxy models for that, which enabled all of those gadget teams to actually properly understand how these things were going to work and code them up.
So some interesting stuff in this that never made it in the game. At one point, you needed to charge a battery to use certain gadgets. So at the side, there was kind of a battery there. And every time you used a gadget that had a certain battery level, that would deplete part of the battery. So part of the idea for the levels would be that you were in this constant search for energy. That eventually got scrapped. It was a really difficult thing to build levels around, and also got quite repetitive, doing this constantly searching for these different energy sources. There was also a supercharger, which kind of supercharged your strength as well. So this is a really early version of a web splat that's in the game. This used a kind of slingshot mechanic, so you'd pull down on the screen and that would kind of focus your aim. This is pick up and throw that also used this kind of Angry Bird slingshot mechanic of like dragging back and flicking these pickup objects. So here I'm supercharging so that I can pick up a much heavier object. Again, this stuff didn't really make it in the game, but this whole level was a really, really nice little test bed for all of the things that we were trying out with the character. And even though some things were maybe either underused or just didn't make it in at all, it started to give the level design team a bit of information and confidence that, okay, we've got all of this stuff, all of these toys that we can now play with. So this is examples of different types of surfaces, so slidey surfaces, grippy surfaces, how they respond to gravity and different things like that. So all of this testbed stuff was just a really great reference for the level design team.
Yeah, so it was almost developing the tools that they were going to have to build levels moving forward.
Yeah. Here's something else that got cut. This was a drone, and this was kind of a piano you could play with the drone.
You can also see the UI team's work as well starting to come through in the kind of tutorials from Dr. Aaron. Yeah. And even the different contexts where you can pick up and throw, or going into photo mode. So I mean, that's the likes of Dariush, Pete Nelship, Buwan. Just you can start seeing all of their work just starting to come in this kind of parallel channel to all the rest of the development.
Yeah, again, they were having to respond like daily to design changes on the character. And that's a level that we kept up to date for quite a lot of the development process. So we had one games designer James, who was constantly keeping that thing updated, so that at each milestone we would ship this test room, and like Apple and management at Sumo could play and see what all the latest cool stuff with the character was. But it was still very much in these parallel streams. It wasn't quite coming together yet. And I think the next thing we can talk about is kind of the struggle that we went through to find spaces that really works with the character and were engaging to play. So we've got this, we've got a few videos that are going to show a single level going through a few different milestones, and you'll see various things change. the kind of the core space, you can see how long we struggled with really defining what we call Spyder space, as opposed to sort of the human space on the periphery. So I think, again, we've got some videos we can show of that.
I think what's interesting about this is that because we were still discovering what that play space for the Spyder was, the environment team were there. They still needed to be doing, you know, cracking on with building this stuff. You know, we know when the end date is for delivery, and you know, we need to crack on. So we came up with this idea of the environment artists worked from the outside in. So they worked on the furthest thing away from the player, and they worked towards. And we had this concept of background, human space, and then Spyder space. So the background was what engulfed you, what set the scene, which kind of communicated the location. In terms of those spy tropes that we talked about earlier. So yeah, mountain base in this case. Then we had the human space, which is a space that Spyder can see, but can't get to. And that is where you kind of see the normality, and it's a connection with the real world, and it's a way of getting across the scale of the thing. So you'll see people in the mountain base. We had human characters in there. We had people walking around the gantries, just to give that scale and understand the size of this space. And then the Spyder space was the actual playable space where the mission took place.
Yeah, I think having that distinction was very important. I wanted just to kind of seal it off almost from those two separate things. But yeah, I remember the big moment when the characters went into the background. That just made such a difference, because it just brought the life and an interest to the background. But yeah, usually in environments, it's basically you work on the actual playable space first. So this was kind of doing things in reverse. But you know, there was good reasons for that.
It really was, because there was such a learning process to go through to make this game. Because going back to what I said at the kind of the top of the stream, there was no game to kind of reference from, even though something like Mario Galaxy does do kind of a little bit of 360-degree navigation. It's still very much on a sort of orbital, in an orbital rotation. So we were learning every day. We went into the office, we were learning more and more on how to make this game. And I think if we go to the next video, you'll see that the play space, the human space, is still getting better. So the background's getting better, and there's a little bit more detail in the Spyder space, but there's still really sort of no sense of sort of navigation aids or what you're meant to do. And it was really easy to get lost in these spaces. So even though this is a level that ended up in the final game, it's actually the last level of the game. It went through this sort of transformative period of like trying to discover exactly what makes Spyder a game people are going to want to play. And although it was always kind of cool walking on walls, walking on ceilings, without having this kind of fundamental aspects to a game of kind of your mission beats and knowing where to go and knowing what to do next, it really was just a confusing experience for so many players that played it. But again, you see the character getting a little bit better with each of these videos. You definitely see the backgrounds getting a lot better. And I think there's one more video, which is the July milestone on this. And again, you'll see that like the background space on this is looking beautiful, almost at the level that we shipped.
Yeah, we've got solid lighting passes going in at this point as well. You know, we're really kind of setting the scene here.
But still, the mission was not fun to play. People just did not really understand what to do, how to get there.
The play space is still like in its lowest level of detail that you could imagine.
You can see that we sped up Agent 8 actually in this video, is in an effort to try and make it a bit more exciting. We were that desperate at this point.
Yeah. Oh, do you remember the ice cubes? Yeah.
Well, it's also worth noting that as well, across those 3 videos, that it went from 2 on-screen thumbsticks to 1 on-screen thumbstick, and now in this video to no on-screen thumbsticks. Might just want to file that one away.
Yeah, so we weren't even showing thumbsticks. And the strafe movement had gone by this point as well. So it is interesting to see that like the character Agent 8 was developing, and the backgrounds were definitely developing, and aspects of the level design were developing. We were finding things that were kind of fun and would eventually make it into what we know as the final game, something like this unscrewing this panel. But what we found was like, you know, originally you'd walk around to all of these 4 different screws and take it off. That gets boring real quick. So it's like one of the things we did was we really stripped down the amount of repetitiveness in kind of some of the gadget use. As a very early version of one of the gadgets that's in the final game. But after this, we kind of had our second, how can I say? We were really struggling, and we decided to do kind of what we did with Vertical Sliver, which was focus the entire team on creating a level that we could be proud of. And that was coinciding with Gamescom. So in July and August, we kind of went back to the drawing board on the level. We got designers from all disciplines to basically do a moment-to-moment walkthrough of what would be interesting for the player. We started to define a few different visual languages, so like what was navigable, what you could navigate and what you couldn't navigate, and this was a massive effort by the team to release to put together a demo that could be shown at Gamescom.
This was at the point, wasn't it, Nick, where you came to me and Mick as the art leads and said you want to scrap pretty much everything that we've done and you wanted us to start again. That was it, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
No, I'm joking. It was that there was some major overhauls, right, that were being proposed, and yeah, the guys did an absolutely awesome job and kind of took the bull by the horns as well, really, and embraced the challenge because they could see that the level wasn't going anywhere.
Yeah,
and
I mean, everybody was looking for direction, weren't they? You know,
yeah.
So this was kind of a big charge to really steer the ship in the direction that it needed to head in to ship this game. Because we're talking July, August, where, you know, realistically 6 months away from a beta. So, and we still didn't really know what our game was. And I think
this is nearly a year from when the guys that had worked on the original PC demo had been working on this thing. You know, patience of a saint is how I could describe it, I think. And you know, that drive to keep going and to want to prove that this thing could work was
absolutely
pretty admirable, really.
Yeah, we've got some video of this milestone. So we called it the Gamescom demo. Even it was a Gamescom demo that never was, because it was kind of too early to do marketing for the game. But it coincided. It was there as a banker, you know, if our marketing team needed it. So the work you're seeing is in 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks from what you last saw. So now we have the Spyder space fully arted up. The level that we've happening here is the same level that we ended up shipping with. We built about half of it, and we ended up not changing any of that. And this is in the released game. So a lot of different things started coming in as we were building this. So we started defining these kind of red as being a no-go space, because I think that was one of the key things that was tripping us up. We got this character that could go anywhere. So we were building levels where you could go anywhere. As soon as we started restricting where the player can go, that all of a sudden kind of opened up more of a 360-degree nature of the game in a weird way. So restricting access made the game more open and more give the player more opportunities for exploration.
There's also
Agent 8 kind of in a final state here as well. Pretty much lighting is great. So to go from July to August.
Yeah.
There's also a touch point here from the camera team. So Sam Royal, one of the programmers who was just focused on solving the puzzle or the problem of cameras in this space. Both he and Luke Thurkel from the design discipline were kind of just continuing to research and just critically analyze any game and any approach remotely to do with world relative or player relative cameras, and how that impacts downstream or in tandem controls. And they were looking at things like, Rocket League, if and when you can get up to the ceiling, at what point do your controls reverse, if at all? Should your camera invert as well? And how far, do you flip immediately, or do you flip as soon as you take your controls input off and on again? And this is the first part where, just at the start of this video, where you saw the Spyder just use one of those chevrons as a guide to just peel off the side, peel right, peel left, and it's everybody who saw it was just like, that is one giant Spyder step forward.
Yeah, it was kind of like a lot of visual messaging, wasn't there, going into the environment art, and a lot of navigational, kind of subliminal navigational aids.
Yeah, and so the language, once it was starting to come together, the interaction as well. But yeah, I think again we split the levels up into sections, which kind of was a format for the later levels, and I made it easy as well because again we had the whole environment team. I think with plus Steve Abbs, I think, who has joined us at this point, and each would take an act or a section and work with the team in Sumo India as well. So it was people all on board. I remember, I think Declan was working on the outer ring of first section there, as Brendan was saying, with the visual language for the red lines and the red no-go geometry and the little decals there to tell the player that it can actually go over the edge and walk around to the side and underneath objects as well, which kind of queued things up for gameplay. So there was lots of things going off on that.
It was the first time as well that from a camera point of view, like you touched on it earlier, Brendan, there was a bit of a eureka moment with the camera, because previously Spyder was always on the bottom of the screen, and when he was on an upside down surface, he was still on the bottom of the screen. And this was a massive turning point, which got across the orientation of where you were within the world as a human sees it. So when Spyder's now upside down, he's on the top of the screen, and when he's going up a wall, he's on the side of the screen. And I remember sitting in a review where Sam and Luke kind of presented this, and we were like, eureka, that is it, that is the thing that we've been missing. That's a massive turning point. And and at the same time, the visual language stuff that you were just talking about, Nick, came in. Yellow for interaction, red for non-walkable, these kind of navigational sort of hints for where you need to go. All of that sort of started coming about. We've got tremendous lighting in there at this point. The backgrounds are looking amazing. All the work being done by the Sumo India guys is coming through, and all the PBR stuff is working lovely. And it was just, everything kind of came together at that point. And there were all of these different kind of things working in parallel that you talked about earlier, Nick, just all seemed to arrive ahead at this point. And it was a kind of a really satisfying moment where it's like, yes, we knew that there was good in there. We knew it, and we've been struggling for so long. And it was a really, really nice feeling, actually.
It was great because we could finally sort of show even just people in the studio. I remember shortly after we'd finished it, there was like a company meeting where everybody shows off what they're working on. And you know, before, when things like the vertical sliver had been shown, it was a sort of hang your head in shame moment because we just weren't happy with where it was. And finally, we had something that we could say, hey, we really like this. We think this is great. You should come and play this, you know. So we did start playtesting at that point. And it's worth mentioning as well that we had QA on from a very early stage on this project, because we knew with the sort of the nature of a six-legged IK-driven character that testing the bounds of how that character operates and what works and what doesn't work, and finding those little snag points in a level, that was going to be a huge task. So normally, you know, on some games, QA are kind of like the last people to join the project, and you know, they do this really concerted effort in just squashing bugs. We had these guys on from a very early stage in the project to help us out and to give us feedback, and to help us sort of shape the game as well. So as a design team, we were constantly using them as a resource, as kind of bouncing off ideas, watching them play. And that again, I think they were fundamental in helping create that Gamescom demo as well, because we had kind of a market that we were building this game for QA, because we knew what they'd had to play for so many months, and it was kind of like, here guys, you'll like this.
Yeah, and I think as well, this is where it all comes together. But again, going back to the original PC demo, I think this is where Unreal came into its own as well, because we could then just enable depth of field again to enhance the scale for the background. So that was dynamic. That wasn't actually faked. That was a real, you know, a dynamic depth of field, which worked really well. Again, I think one thing we found of this level as well, that in terms of lighting, because this was the first kind of playable space we had to work on, we found that the interior sections, because it lost its indirect light because it was in shadow, the character, the spider, lost kind of grounded on surfaces. And we didn't have, as a PC demo, had screen space ambient occlusion. So the lighting artist Wayne and Richard, the tech artist, kind of came up with a really ingenious solution whereby they attached deferred decals to the legs and the body. And by manipulating that in a particular way, it gives the impression of screen space ambient occlusion as a spider walks around the level. It's something you might not consciously pick up on, but it does make a difference in actually grounding the character to the surface it's walking on, which in a game like Spyder is very important. And also there was an iteration of the outline shader again, which was in the old PC demo original. But I think it still needs a bit more tweaking. But again, this is not something you'd associate automatically with a mobile platform. But these are all the things that we were able to work on and put into the game. And in the realms of the performance as well, it all worked together and added to the visual quality of the level. So yeah, I mean, again, all the team worked incredibly hard again, and this was another big turning point. Was this for them? This kind of set this up for the remaining levels.
Yeah, I think as well, just on the space navigation and the playtesting that design we're driving. Again, this demo showcased a couple of really deft solutions, like the mission manager, the work that tech designer Dave Thwaite have been doing in the background in conjunction with the UI team. So Pete Nettleship, Daryush, Craig Allen, just hammering away in the background. This was kind of the first big unveil of that system, where they could put together objectives and sub-objectives as a system to breadcrumb players along. I'm pretty sure that UI is close to ship.
It's close.
Yeah.
We heavily breadcrumbed that level because we knew it was going to be first time players ever really kind of played what was going to be representative of our game. So we kind of overly breadcrumbed demo, but the systems all held up and the UI really held up. Yeah. So once we got a level or half a level that we were proud of, we then had to go build another bunch of levels to because a game cannot be one level.
It's funny you say that, actually, because the levels are all in acts, aren't they? And didn't we just do act 1 and 2?
We did act 1 and 2, and they exist in the final game pretty much as they were in that
demo,
that August demo. Yeah. So after Gamescom, we kind of knew what we were making, which was really great. So we started to build a few more levels, and we went back to this more parallel approach of having 2 levels in development at the same time. So instead of bringing effectively, I think we used to do like 3 levels in parallel at the same time, I believe, So we brought everybody back into one stream to focus on this milestone. And then we kind of split them again to start doing 2 levels in conjunction. And things just started to go really well, which was a really nice feeling. So you come in every day and there'd be loads more progress. And we can show, I think, some videos of some of the other levels from the game in a very early stage. So this was all leading us to December, which was kind of our cutoff for all content. So it was kind of a beta. We knew everything would be in a little bit of a rough state, but the majority of the art was there. The majority of the levels were there. We decided to do 6 levels because building levels for this game is hard, and they're complex spaces. You can see that the early section of that bomber level was kind of like fairly representative of what's in the game, but then we come to a section like here, the engine, where it's still all very much grey box. Then you've got blocks to represent objects in the game. We've still got some nice VFX though from Pete there. You can see that Agent A is looking pretty much final at this point. This is the train level. Again, very early block out, but it was really about we were much more confident in the kind of the spaces that we were creating and the mission structures that we got together. This is kind of a click to complete level. So you're just basically clicking on these green cubes to complete objectives, but it allowed us to understand the pacing and the rhythm of the level.
Size of the level as well, and the scope in terms of creation and what this stage allowed us to do as an art team was to then spec everything out, do asset lists, and start getting that made, while then the click to complete was turned into fully functional objectives and puzzles and everything else.
And there was still quite a lot of iteration at this point, so we never really settled. If something wasn't working, we did rework it, and something like the undercarriage of the train went through quite a lot of different revisions, the layout of it, and because it was quite a confusing space. There's a lot going on. You're on the underneath of this train. The tracks are running underneath you. You've got all of these mechanisms of the train you've got to navigate. And then this is a really early version of the space level, which has got something we call space fishing in it, which I think we'll get onto in the next section. Brendan will love me for it. So again, this is all super early stuff. We're getting just the shapes together. We're getting the puzzles together. We're getting to the flow of the levels together. But with each week, we played builds. The game was just getting better and better and better. And here's an early underwater. Again, all grey box. But it's essentially something like this is essentially the level that you play in the final game in a really sort of early form.
I think it's just worth noting as well that these levels all have their kind of technical challenges as well. So the capsule level, the outer space one there you saw, that was the only level that was actually real-time lit, the whole thing, because the light actually, or the sun, rotated around the objects to give this sense of the actual capsule spinning through space. So again, that was a unique level. The rest of the levels, majority of which were baked lighting. So it had a unique challenge there. And so the train level with the moving backgrounds, we Richard, the tech artist, and Wayne, the lighting artist, had to do a special setup to have to bake and have the background sections moving. I think there was a script as well that could call particular elements like a tunnel at certain key points in the game as well. So each level wasn't like a reskin of the first one. It was all very bespoke things going on each level to support, which is good.
What problems can we give ourselves this time?
Well, just while you're talking about that, I mean, that was one of the things I was just going to segue into was behind the scenes. We had another team, Core Tech, which was led by Dennis Kozashenko, and both Dennis and the code lead Mike Welsh were furiously profiling these levels as they were coming in. So, you had art and environment art creating these amazing spaces. And then you had the texture artist and the VFX artist, VFX Pete and with Victor and Wayne. They were going, oh my God, this looks beautiful. And they'd go home going, I've made the greatest thing ever. And then all our reporting coming through from Jenkins would be just like, so about that triangle budget, and what's the story with the draw calls here, fellas? And they're just like, but it looks beautiful. It's just like, so at that point, you'd see Dennis walking around, or we also had a Mackie, and we were lucky enough to have a Mackie. I don't think this, we had a Mackie and we had a Ben Taylor. So, I mean, we were in pretty good shape in terms of bringing to bear on the performance problem pretty much the performance sheriffs. And I think our budgets, just looking over some of the mails, I think our budgets for levels were about 500,000 triangles and about 700 draw calls. And I think
show some concept art while you're talking.
Yeah, and I think that was, for the longest time, our reports kept coming through red.
Yeah, but I do have to say, Brendan, just to say that the Sever-Lod set wasn't actually set up, I think, towards that stage anyway. So I think all this was going to come online, which I think Richard was policing on our side. But yeah, there's always that refinement of just getting the budgets down to those exact numbers.
Yeah, and in terms of content, the content is the exact same in terms of on our lowest end supported devices. So, I mean, the Spyder runs on iPhone, the iPhone SE, which I think is an A9, and possibly the iPhone 6, which I think might even be an A8 chipset. And, there's not any different geometry there's LOD settings, but it's the same levels that are on those platforms right up to the high-end phones. And that was kind of, we continually see this kind of back and forth of the game looks amazing, okay, but our reports say otherwise.
What was really interesting about that, though, Brendan, is that that we never lost that amazing look that we had when we were going, yeah, that looks amazing. What was brilliant was the work that the code team did, but also Rich Richter, the tech artist, identifying how we could optimize this stuff, and then the environment artist just going in and working through those points and then learning those lessons moving forward. It was never a case where we needed to drop visual quality or there was a look or a feel that we couldn't achieve. We were able to work around the problems and achieve the same thing, just with a slightly different way of working or a cleverer way of implementing this stuff. So
that's a great point, Chris.
That was really good. I mean, Rich Richter was absolutely invaluable as a tech artist on this project. It was, I mean, the work that he did was utterly phenomenal. Yeah.
Great thing about Richard as well, he only provides solutions, which is a great thing to have. If there's a problem, he's already got a solution for it. I think as well, from a technical point of view, just going back to the mountain base, I think we end up using HLODs, I think, for the main structure and that, just to control the draw calls, which again is not just using the standard LODs, but again, just using Unreal's feature set to help get performance down.
And
I think Chris, sorry, and tech design as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I know that Dave Thwaite, Luke Botham, Michelle Chapman, they were constantly poring over the levels, looking for ways we can instance that. Like the solar panel and all those individual solar cells or photovoltaic cells, they were pretty much just saying, if that's not interactable, and if there's no gameplay on it, then yeah, instance. And it was just it was a really, really collaborative loop in terms of performance hunting. I mean, it was something that Mike, Dennis, Richard Mackey, Ben Taylor, they were just constantly monitoring, isolating what the issues were, bringing them to the table and saying, this is the impact right here. And again, QA need to get a shout out for that, because Emma's team, Jordan and James and Mark, and there was quite a few of them, but they were, during their playthroughs, we would be recording data and getting that into Microsoft BI, business intelligence software, and being able to identify, we've got a hotspot here, we've got a hotspot here, we've got a hotspot here, jumping into a level, doing some trace captures and seeing what's actually going on here. It's like, oh, someone's creating some dynamic lights, which aren't really great on these particular platforms. And that was it. It was just, previous projects, you can there's kind of a tendency to leave performance till the end. So you kind of have this very high visual aesthetic, and then you kind of have a certain amount of clawback.
Nothing was left to linger at all, was it?
Yeah, I think it was basically that the groundwork that Mike and Dennis and Mackie and Ben Taylor had put in it as early as they possibly could. Once the project hardware targets were agreed, it was a case of, all right, this is something that we're going to have to pay as you go. And
yeah, I think as well, the levels as well, I was saying, were quite diverse. So I think Chris has touched on the PBR material set that we had. So we had a common material library, which were PBR, and basically the PBR basically enabled us to use the same material in completely different lighting situations, and we would always get a consistent response. So if we had a metal, we know it would look good either underwater or on a train or in space. So I think that was an efficient workflow. It's not something you'd associate with a mobile platform, but again, that's something that Unreal allowed us to do, and it was very efficient in that we just could make a set of materials and we could polish those, knowing that they would work in all these different scenarios. Again, this is with the different levels. This is kind of where we switched from everybody working on one particular level to then people breaking up. So Declan, Simon, Harriet, and Steve were working with kind of micro teams with the Sumo India team with Ian leading, and it kind of diverged. Everybody was working in parallel on separate levels. So again, it's kind of a shift away to get all these levels completed.
Yeah, they were almost like the level owners, weren't they? In the Sheffield studio, with then support from our studio in India, and the whole system worked really, really well. It was they did a really, really good job.
Yeah, obviously everybody works really hard. It was a very efficient workflow as well, and things came together pretty quickly after that.
Yeah, I mean, what we had was we had a really great rapport between design, art, and code. And it's probably worth sort of discussing kind of the design makeup of kind of how the team and how everybody worked together. So we kind of had three different disciplines. We have games design, we have level design, and we have tech design. So in terms of games design, we had James Furlong, who was kind of new to the industry. He was actually studying at the time, and we managed to persuade him to leave his course and join full-time. He was that good. Luke, who'd been on the project since Game Jam. So those guys were primarily looking at character and looking at playability of the levels, camera as well. So then the level design team, they would go in and they would create kind of a block out levels. They were led by Chris, but there was Ben, there was Luke, there was Jacopo, Saul, Shane, and Zai, and these guys. There was usually two of them on any one level at any one time, sort of working together collaboratively to create these spaces once we knew what these spaces were. And they would work with the games design guys, but also with the tech design guys, who were really the people that kind of pulled all this stuff in terms of playability and all of the things that you interact with together. So they were kind of led by Dave Thwaite, who's previously worked on Crackdown, Luke, Michelle, Elroy, Justin, Fabian, and Radu. So again, it was like 7 tech designers, 7 level designers, a couple of games designers. Yush, who was doing the UX, along with Phil, who did a lot of the metagame stuff. So it was a pretty large design team that put this together. But we just found this really great rhythm and this really great way of working together with no one stepping on each other's toes. Level design worked really great with the environment art team. The games designers worked really great with the animators and the character team and the code guys doing the character. And tech design really were the kind of the unsung heroes on this project, because they really had to do a lot of the heavy lifting, because everything in this game is bespoke, where there's very few things that are repeated, and if they are repeated, they're probably not repeated under the hood. So
there's not much systemic gameplay in there for sure. It's
and I think that's what makes the game fun, is that you never know what's coming next, because there's not a lot of repeated mechanics. But that meant a lot of hard work for tech design, and a lot of hard work for gameplay coders. As if we move on to the next slide, Brendan.
Oh, this is the joyous bit for Brendan.
Yeah. So as we were building these levels, we were getting more and more confident, and things that we said that we were never going to do.
Never.
We kind of started doing. So even though we had a water level, Brendan was always like, so you're never going to go in the water, right? Water's on the outside, water's in the human space, right? There's no water.
Yes, Brendan.
Well, I mean, I wasn't telling, I was asking. I was just like, cool, there's an underwater base, cool. Is water something that's going to be? No. All right, you sure? Yeah. You don't need any water tech. No. Soft body. No buoyancy. No. It's going to be the Sahara of submarines, Brendan. It's going to be bone dry. All right, cool. I guess that's the rest. All right. Yeah, sure. Cool.
And then we were going to space, weren't we, Brendan? And there was never going to be any 0G,
So, yeah.
I think we got some videos we can look at.
Yeah, we do. I'll play the water test.
Yeah. So as we were growing in confidence, we started to go back on some of the things that we said to Brendan we would never do. So this is an example of some water tech. Maybe you just want to take over and explain what's going on here and the genius behind it.
So, yeah, as Nick said, water was never ever going to happen. Buoyancy was never ever going to happen until it was. And basically one of our coders, Dan Millward, who's on the Gadgets team, he just caught in a drive-by from Nick's ideas. We kind of left him alone for a minute, came back, and he was just covered in Post-its, and all we could see was just water fishing. So the brief was, as Nick says, the design team were getting more and more confident in and ambitious in terms of what they wanted to do. You can see the spider moving around in a rollerball was also something that that prototype, Andy Chapman knocked that out pretty quickly, and that lit the design room on fire. Everybody was just like, wow, there's a lot of fun here, there's something here. And meanwhile, Dan was just given the challenge of, this is what we're looking to get to, see what you can do. And I think Dan had probably about a time box of about 2 days for this.
Water levels were never going to change either as well, whether if we were going to
there's going to be water, right? But the level won't it won't move up and down.
Yeah. So, but I mean, Dan's one of these programmers that lives and breathes everything epic and everything Unreal. So I mean, he's very, very comfortable with the cookbook of ingredients that he has. So as he's getting these scattershot noodle ideas thrown at him, he's kind of distilling them down into, okay, well, what are the components that I can repurpose and reuse to achieve what I understand to be Nick's ask. And I think within about 2 days, give or take, I mean, Dan will probably say shorter than that, he had this prototype, and it was very forward thinking, because even though he was told the water plane's never going to change, never, I think Dan was wise to the ways of...
I think he knew Nick at this point. He knew Nick at this point, and he knew what was going to come once he saw the water.
Yeah, and then he pretty much anticipated a lot of the needs that, the different actors, some that you can throw in and they remain buoyant, some that you throw in and they remain buoyant for a tunable, tweakable amount of time, and then they'll descend, and then some that will just descend, and they all have termination behavior as well that some of them will kind of destruct, and even things like essential gameplay objects. That was again something that Dan kind of forecast as well. As soon as I give people this, I think early on the idea was that water would be lethal to the electrical Spyder or something along those lines. So the idea was that when it was put in, it was going to be an obstacle, and you'd have to use like Andy Chapman's rollerball tech to kind of get across it. The idea was, okay, well, you know, people like to break things. So what happens if the player just throws in a mission critical item in here? So it was a case of, okay, well, that's another type of item that I'll say, if you die in water and you're a mission critical item, respawn you back to where you should be. And, you know, so, you know,
you could fish things out of the water.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and that was it. So again, Steve Keen's team for the gadget team, you know, again, in a kind of parallel stream, they were powering through web pull, web retrieve, web grapple, web grab. It had about 5 different names. I'm still not sure which is which, much to everybody's laughter. And just this emergent gameplay arrived where it was a case of I can throw something in, okay, and then I can use one of my gadgets to kind of fish it out within a certain amount of time window. And when the design guys saw this, they were just like, oh my God, this is such a fun toy box of stuff. I can think of so much. And this was immediately, the team that were looking at the underwater capsule level, they were immediately like, this is great. And I'm pretty sure all of this implementation is Blueprint. It's something that Dan's very proud of this, and he's kind of got it as a very tidy sample of just off the shelf Unreal components. So that was water fishing for sure. I don't know is
there anywhere else where you think that you might like to fish, Brendan?
So we've got a space level, don't we, Brendan? and what was the deal? Yeah, no gravity, never a thing. I think we can probably play the next video.
So the other thing was, when code get kind of looped in and saying, so we've got a new level, cool, where is it? Oh, it's in the space. And they say things when they cover their mouth, hoping that you don't hear it. So it's just like, what? And she's like, yeah, we're going, you know, Agent 8's going to space. Cool. What's going to happen with gravity? Don't worry about it. There's, you know, it'll be fine. We're not doing any kind of space, any kind of zero G. It's fine. You sure? Because we can front load some prototyping around this. It's cool. But as Nick says, the confidence was growing and the ambition was growing. And same thing, it ended up as the code team went for a cup of tea. We forgot about Dan, or we left him behind. We came back, he was just riddled with Post-its, and it was just like another drive-by. Friends, don't let friends code alone. We were just like, all right, what's happening, Dan? He's just like, I know where they're looking to go to. They want some kind of space-like faked physics where you can pick things up and you can throw them, and there's a certain amount of impulse, and then there's a certain amount of decay over distance, and it'll give the illusion of pick up and throw. And pick up and throw is something that was in the game for quite a while. You'll see it. But again, as Steve Keen's gadget team, Andy Ware, Steve, and some of the other guys, as web grapple, web pull, web retrieve was coming on board, all of these different permutations and interactions were surfacing. And it was just feeding into the design team who were looking at ways to make engaging stuff in space. And that motif, when I can't remember again how quickly Dan put this together.
It was quick.
But yeah, it was pretty quick. And it was something that just everybody immediately just spent time just playing with this, just picking up things and just throwing it. And again, it was quite forward thinking in the sense that, well, I should never be able to throw something outside the distance of my retrieval tools. Thinking about mission critical stuff, like if a player throws the essential key off into space, you know, there's no way for them to get it back. But I think there's a way that maybe if you go from one thing onto another, I don't know. I'm sure Dan's got it covered. Yeah. And then this led to one of the motifs in the space level where there's probably some footage already shown where you're kind of building bridges and you're kind of repairing pipes. And again, it was another one of those moments, like Chris talked about eureka moments before, because each of the discipline leads pretty much at this point every evening was sitting in a room for about an hour just playing today's progress, making a hit list, and saying, right, this is the stuff that needs to be prioritized for the next couple of days. And as soon as the motifs around space were in, everybody in that review meeting was just like, oh my, there's something here about just picking something up, the immediacy of being able to pick something or retrieve something, walk over and place it. And it just tapped into the part of the brain of like jigsaw puzzles or Tetris, where you're just taking shapes and putting them in the right place. And a lot of people who were watching the whoever it was playing didn't necessarily have the same experience, but as soon as you put the device in their hands and said, try this motif, there was a lot of engagement.
This stuff was coming in pretty hot though as well. I mean, this was October, November, this stuff, so it kind of had to work. So I think that's a sign of a level of confidence the team had at that point, but we could start throwing these things that we were never going to do. We'd start throwing these problems at people, and people would respond to it. Yeah,
never going to do it for sure.
Yeah,
positive.
Yeah, just lots of work on all the levels. Everything was going off at the same time, and things are really starting to come together. I know we showed the kind of a space fishing exit on one of the earlier kind of block out levels, but that level, I think at this stage, was basically almost fully arted up, or that section was, and to see that level of polish, working together with this new system as well, and working really well, because I think that's probably one of my favorite parts of the game. I think that was really good. I think it spurred everybody on for the final push for the end of the game, because the levels were starting to look, really amazing. These new levels coming in, and new gameplay features as well.
And it's worth saying as well, Mick, that because of all the upfront work we had done with like the shader stuff and the tileable materials, all this stuff came about like from going to sort of a white box environment to the final art version. It was a really, really quick and compressed period of time. It all happened so quickly.
6 weeks at level, wasn't it, really?
Yeah. I mean, when you look back at the videos we were watching earlier of the mountain base and the months of development that took, and we were knocking out levels in such a relatively quick period of time in comparison to what they had taken.
It was, sorry, you're right. Yeah, the tile material workflow was very efficient with the bake lighting on top. Yeah, and literally, a level could go from grey box to almost fully arted up in a very short space of time. So it was really, lots of things were happening at this point.
I think the audio was coming in at this point as well. I think as soon as space fishing hit the review rooms, Dom Parker, who was the audio lead, he started just getting more and more of the music in place, and there was just a couple of times where people were really starting to sit up and go, this is very, very atmospheric now. This is very, there's some really polished segments in this.
It was all 5.1 mixed as well.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, for a mobile game, the audio team treated it like a AAA console game. Apple Arcade is quite a different market to, say, a free-to-play game. And so we were hopeful that people would be playing it in a more concentrated manner. And Dom really, really ran with the audio on this game. It is a beautiful thing to listen to. And the space level, particularly the atmosphere we managed to get on that level is incredible.
Yeah. I think as well, pretty much everything, every feature, every interaction, the audio team had a really good rapport with. I think, again, it was probably Steve Keane and his gadget team were pretty much the go-to guys for audio coding support. Every interaction, it was a case of audio putting their hand saying, "Can I get a call back for that event right there? I just want to do some audio magic." And as soon as audio Dom got into that mix, then it was VFX Pete standing right beside him going, "And me, can VFX get a call back at the start of that and at the end of that sequence as well?" And that was, Steve's team very quickly were just like, in any of the specs and any of the work, they were just like, before you even ask, yes, here's your audio callbacks, here's your VFX callbacks. Yeah, got it. And it just led to this, this really, really polished, considered piece. To the point where there was a couple of reviews where they were, the grapple animations, where it was, people were watching those at 1/10 the normal speed, and they were just saying, okay, that's a little bit, can we have that a little bit snappier? Can we have that segment a little bit longer? And can we have, that's where I want my audio effect to start. That's where I want my VFX. There was so much attention for every interaction, and just curated experience. And like, I mean, that's kind of where that tempo for me, it just became a noticeable point at that, where the audio really started to just go into the atmosphere.
Yeah. Wanted to show some of the levels that didn't make it in the game, because there was a few that we were developing and we were kind of struggling with, and after the Gamescom demo, we were really rational about picking the levels that we knew were going to work the best. So again, I think we've got a video of some of the lost levels from the game that we can take a look at. So we had a casino level for the longest time. I mean, this was in development about the same length of time as the mountain base. We just couldn't really.
And this had a completely finished background as well. Like
it looks great.
It looked great. Like completely finished. That goes back to the workflow that we had, that we talked about. No, it harks back to the workflow that we talked about earlier, where we worked outwards and inwards. And this is a great example of that, where you've got a grey box environment again, and you've got this cracking little vista, but the level wasn't working, so we had to make those decisions. This is interesting because this is the original underwater base.
Yeah, this is the
original. And on the same thing, this is the same background that is used in the underwater base that actually made it, or the submarine level that made it into the final game. The background is exactly the same. The only thing that changed was the spider space. So that decision of working outwards in, this is an example of where that really, really paid off.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, we were still trying to work out what sort of size of space worked, and this is a really good example. The elevator. The idea here would be you'd be working with a human agent and trying to get the elevator to the floor to get them to the vault or whatever it was. Really nice idea, and a really great sort of human environment, but the space was just too massive to navigate for a 2-centimeter bodied robot agent, So I mean, looking up this elevator shaft is beautiful, but again, we were learning from the Gamescom demo that the kind of stuff that was working and the kind of things that weren't working. So I mean, I think now we can maybe talk a little bit about launch. So we basically got every level to a kind of beta state by Christmas, and we came back from Christmas and we really had 2 months before we needed to lock down the game and ship. Normally we'd just be in bug fixing, but we spent a vast majority of that time polishing the content that we had. And this was probably one of the best moments on the project for me, because I'd create a snag list of things that I'd like to see fixed. And I think, well, this is a lot of stuff. If I get all this will be great. 3 days later, it's all gone through. And it's like, what? Okay, right. So here's the next level of snag. No, if I get through this will be great. And then eventually it was at a point where you were just fine tuning the most insignificant little interaction, because just a couple more frames, let it hang a little bit more there and all this kind of stuff. So by the end of this 2 months, we were really getting into the kind of the details of the level, which was fantastic for us, because there was a point at which we didn't know if we'd make it to that. If you look back to where we were before Gamescom, and to spend 2 months just really working with the team who just knocked it out of the park, just responding so well to all of this feedback that was coming in, and just tuning up every single aspect of the game, art, music, design, everything. It was just a really, really incredible experience. It was a lot of hours.
Things were changing rapidly on a daily basis, though, weren't they? We were having our leads reviews in the evening, and you know, from one day to the next, the progress was just immense. And we'd sort of we'd review 2 levels a night, and like, right, these are the ones that we're hitting. The next night, and the next 2 levels, right, here's a snag list for those. And you know, like you say, generating big lists, and you come back to the review and it's done, great, right, so what are we doing next? And it was just so satisfying that it was that rapid change and that rapid improvement. It was like, yeah, this is cool. This is, everyone was really happy with what was going on.
Yeah,
and really... the team could see it as well, couldn't they? Sorry, Mick. The team could see it themselves, which drove them on to push further. You know, there was never a point where the team was, oh God, I'm done with this. You know, which I've experienced on previous projects, but not with this. There was that drive to keep it going all the time.
Yeah, pushing all the time. I mean, some amazing work, and lots of persistence, and just really getting down into the details that we had, at the end of the game. So it was great to watch.
Really must stress as well how critical production was at this point for making sure that creative types could go in a room and just start pointing at things and saying, we need this stuff fixed, and having our production team, our awesome production team, go through and sort of manage those lists, track progress, report back, track trajectory of like where we were in terms of bugs as well, because we weren't just polishing stuff, we were having to bug fix this game at the same time. And without them, it would have been a mess. I think, they really did a great job in handling all aspects of the sort of close down of the project. But everybody just came together, every department, and over the sort of January and February, particularly of this year, really worked together to create a great game. I think we've got the trailer that we can play.
Sure do. I'm going to mute you all for this.
Okay.
Agent 8, do you copy? Agent 8, do you copy? Protocol breached. Agent 8, we need your help. The world is in serious danger. Our future is in your, hands?
I love the music. It really puts you in the...
Winnie did the music. She's amazing.
It immediately pulls you into sort of the atmosphere that you were trying to create in like late 60s, right? Like you just catch that. If you watch any of those movies, you know where you're at and what you're in for.
Yeah, we've got a spy theme. Yay.
Yeah, I mean, just going back on a couple of points that Nick pointed out about, or Chris mentioned about the end of the project, and people, people getting kind of, on previous projects, people maybe getting tired. If anything, it just, code, we were trying to lock down as much as possible, stabilize the build as much as possible, in the run up to submission, changes the enemy. And meanwhile, the leads are coming out of these reviews with just like lists.
Can we just?
Yeah. But I mean, all of it was good for the game. And just, it was a case of, all right, and again, our core tech team doing all of the instrumentation. So, Dennis, Mackie, Ben Taylor, Mike Welsh just constantly finding ways to just make the game run as fast as possible. It's like, okay, yeah, we should be able to do that. Okay, we should be able to do that. Okay. All of this was kind of happening. It was just a really wide project, or a project with a lot of bandwidth.
We've not mentioned, but it's not just iPhone, right? It's Apple TV as well, and it's also Mac. And that's going back to kind of like 2012 MacBooks, so we had a massive a range of devices that we had to support, which again was why QA was, without them, there's no way we could have made sure this game ran on everything.
Yeah. I mean, there's about 5 points that you could expand on that. I mean, Dariush and the UI team, UIP, the controls guys, because it was touch platforms, there was touch platforms with Bluetooth controllers, TV OS,
Siri remote.
Siri remote is probably its own little story, and then Mac OS, keyboard and mouse, and gamepad, I'm pretty sure as well.
And then the localization into about 8,000 languages as well that we did, didn't we?
Well, I think like maybe 16, 17, maybe 19 cultures, but yeah, there was a lot of work going on. And I mean, the controls guys, Buon as well was involved in all the different input methods, and having just a consistent experience, irrespective of device hot swapping. I mean, it was a lot. And as Nick said, the hardware targets, we were doing our best to find, has anybody got a MacBook Pro from around 2012? Anyone at all? Because as long as it runs Catalina, it's Apple Arcade compatible. And it was just like, yeah, all right, here you go. And that would go to kind of Mackie and Mike Welsh and Ben Taylor and Dennis to just kind of instrument and take some captures and say, all right, wow, well, on this particular MacBook Pro, this game runs at a solid 60 because it's got a dedicated NVIDIA graphics card. It's like, wow, I mean that's 8-year-old hardware, and then just iPad Mini 4 is trying to dig them out from right across. I mean, we just had devices everywhere, and there's like, oh wait, isn't there a iPad Air 2 that we yeah, okay, or MacBook Air, and it was just this constant list of new devices. Like, okay, yeah, and we kind of had to set up individual profiles to get to squeeze as much as possible out, because there was a decision made about, well, what options will we expose in the UI settings to let people toggle this in or off, and our pretty much we're saying we want to curate the absolute best experience, and this is kind of where we want to spend our aesthetic points, or our performance points, and pretty much every one of those platforms were just rinsed for their horsepower.
Yeah, I mean, we had to make it run at 30 on every platform. That was in the contract.
And it was just, it was the iPad Mini 4, the iPhone SE. I think the iPad Mini 4 might be an A8 chipset. So I mean, that's a 2-core device. It's not that wasn't a mean feat. But I mean, again, the guys who were on it, they're the best at what they do, and they just continue to find optimizations and improvements that were just like, okay, yeah, okay. And I mean, and again, that stakeholder group as well, VFX Pete, he did a full pass on pretty much every effect and assigned them profiles for, okay, the high spec profiles, you can have all of this. Mid, you can have a subset of those particle count, and low, you can have a subset of those particle counts again. But, again, there was art was championed quite a bit by pretty much every stakeholder.
We wanted to push it as on every platform, push it to its limits, and I think we managed to do that.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, the quality is kept solid down for the older devices. It has all the qualities, that we. I mean, some things have to be compromised somewhere, but yeah, generally it's a good representation of the game on a high-end spec device as well. So those guys did an amazing job.
Yeah, and I think and just going back to the point about people just kind of continuing to refine and improve, you had the camera guys, Sam Royal, Luke Thurkel, just constantly curating every single experience where they're just like, well, I can make the viewing angle for some of the override cameras just or the override volumes a little bit better, tweak this camera modifier, and they just really curated the entire camera journey from start to finish.
You mentioned earlier a little bit about utilizing dynamic resolution was something that came in the end that helped you overcome some of the performance challenges. Would you mind talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, so so some of it was to do with the managing the thermal states, and basically on the mid and lower platforms, it was a case of sitting down with Art in a room and saying, okay, this is native resolution. Yeah, okay. And this is what that's costing you on these particular platforms. I've got those here maybe. And we pretty much just started using dynamic resolution in scaling down in steps of 5 with the art stakeholders in the room. And they were like, okay, don't really see any change there. Don't really see any change there. Don't really see any change there. And as we increased the usage of dynamic resolution, we could see the performance and the bottlenecks improving in areas where that was the exact issue. And I think on iPad Mini 4 and the iPhone SE and maybe the original tvOS, Apple TV, it's still quite a strong visual for the amount of changes or the amount that we leveraged that. And as Mick mentioned earlier as well, that came along as an approach. I mean, HLODs helped some of the changes to the vignettes and the outline shader on the lower platforms as well is where we're able to claw back some of the performance, whether it was CPU bound or GPU bound. But yeah, the dynamic resolution definitely helped on a lot of the platforms. At very little visual fidelity. I mean, you know, as those stakeholders and decision makers were in the room, they were like, yeah, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. And code were just like, yes.
Yeah, just a little slider, right?
Yeah.
We've received quite a couple of questions.
Okay.
Will you guys be ready for a couple of them?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk a little bit about post-launch, but I mean, I think we've run pretty long anyway, so
we're at the 2-hour mark, but please wrap up, Nick. Go ahead.
I mean, so one of the things that we can talk about is Apple Arcade's slightly different to releasing on a sort of a normal mobile market space. So obviously, Apple's big thing is security and privacy. So we're not allowed to do any analytics. If we were to use any third-party library, that would need to be audited by Apple. So we couldn't do things that maybe if you're doing a free-to-play game, you can do. So checking analytics, seeing where drop-off points are, seeing how far people progress. So we had to be a bit creative with responding to player feedback. And actually, the best tip we got was from Apple, which was keep an eye on the App Store reviews. So on the night we launched, Chris was there, manning the keyboard, ready to respond to any reviews that came in. I took the Saturday. Mel,
I think you had a harder job than I did. I
had like 3, I think,
and it was great. And I had a few reviews come in, and it's like, yeah, this is cool. And I was sat there with a drink, and it was great.
And then on the Saturday, I think we had like 100, and then on the Sunday, I think we had like 100. And one of the things that we've done is we've responded to everybody's review in English. There's a reason for that. It's like, obviously, native English speakers don't really want to trust a translation service to maybe mess up a response to people. So I apologize right now if you have played the game and if you have left a review in a non-English language, but we haven't given you that sort of personal response. But we want to make sure that our response is properly translated if we're doing that. But in every English language review, we've responded to every single one of them. That's usually me as well. That's like on a morning, that's now my daily routine, is to thank players that have really enjoyed the game. And people can give you like a 5-star review, but say, but oh yeah, I want this, change this would be great. And like, we take all of that feedback on board You know, and then there are people who just absolutely downright hate the game, and that's fine. You know, you thank them for playing, and it's like, you know, you can't, especially a game like this, can't be for everybody. And then there's sort of middling reviews, but a lot of people were giving us feedback on App Store reviews, and all of that stuff was being discussed daily on a Teams channel. I'd be posting reviews into the Teams channel at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and sort of as I'm going through stuff, and we talk about them as everybody kind of came online that day. We also had quite a lot of reviews where people were having problems with the game, and we were able to push those to Zendesk support. And for the vast majority of those issues, we were able to help those guys out. I know Brendan did a lot of work on the Zendesk, helping people that were having problems with the game, maybe not loading or things like that. But also, we also looked at the Let's Plays and see where players were kind of getting stuck, and what kind of feedback players were giving us on those. And it was pretty obvious early on but no one likes the way that we'd implemented the way you look around with the camera system. And
the controls.
If you rewind about an hour, you'll probably see me mention that, you know, there's no sticks on screen. And it's like, oh yeah, we went for one stick. And then we had this system where you'd move with either side of the screen, and then you hold two fingers to look around. And we thought we'd built a camera system that kind of guided you organically through a level and was kind of like looking at the things of interest. And, you know, that was our intent. We didn't realize how much control people would want out of the camera. And I think that that's training from so many games where you just have immediate control of the camera from the right stick. So within a week or 2 weeks, I think it was, we didn't have it in the bag. We'd had it, something like it at various points in development, but we definitely didn't have like a tick box, you know, that we could just flip over controls. So we had to go and develop a new control scheme for our second patch. But we released, I think it was 4 patches in 7 weeks. Like the last one's just gone live. And the other interesting thing is that our studio went into lockdown the week that we launched. So that week of the 20th of March, you know, we all started to transition to working from home, obviously, because what's going on in the world. And that was a new experience for everybody, but I think it's a testament again to the team that we managed to respond so quickly to requests and things that, you know, bugs that had been found during a completely new working experience for everybody. So it's just if you are looking to publish on Apple Arcade, that's my sort of biggest post-launch tip is just live on App Store Connect and, you know, really engage with people that are playing the game, even if they don't like your game. Often there's something there. You know, the controls on this game are not for everybody. It was a really difficult design challenge to create a game like this for touch devices. So it's going to be a little bit, you know, it's going to put a few people off. At the same time, we do get a lot of people really complimenting us on the controls, and I think those are the people that are a little bit more forgiving with the camera and let the game guide them a little bit more. But all of that feedback we've got from App Store Connect has just been absolutely fantastic, and it's great to just sit there in the morning, you know, particularly since it's quite a lot of 5-star reviews, which is really nice.
I was going to say, I mean, you could, you know, the French keyboards might be worth mentioning.
Oh yeah. That was one of the patches, right? So we didn't realize that, apologies, we did not realize in France there is a different keyboard layout. And WASD is kind of like a claw hand to do on a French keyboard. Apologies, we fixed it though. I think that was in the 3rd patch. So now you can change the keyboard. But these are little things that took us by surprise, even though we were getting hundreds of devices into the studio and testing across this huge range of devices. We never thought to get a German MacBook, a French MacBook, you know, a Japanese MacBook, right? So, I mean, I can't imagine if we would have caught the French keyboard thing early, but again, so there's a lot of 1-star reviews left on the Mac OS reviews that we were like, oh God, okay, this is a problem, right? You know, we need to fix this. So again, we got that feedback through App Store Connect, responded to it as quickly as we possibly could. And a lot of people that we responded to each of those people that had left a review with a carefully curated, translated response to inform them that the latest update had gone in, and that you could now choose AZERTY keyboards. And a lot of people came back and gave us 5-star reviews after that. So it's been really rewarding just engaging with the players. The player base has been fantastic, pretty much.
I'm sure there must have been several occasions of, oh, we, you know, like with that range of devices and everything else, and that,
yeah,
it's such a, also probably a late stage in development when you're trying to finalize everything that you set out to do as well in your milestones. So
yeah,
congratulations. I'll pass that on from us, because it seems like a very compelling and original game, and especially being able to provide it to such a large audience is really cool and spectacular, and I would like to congratulate for that. A lot of nice little anecdotes and things coming out of this chat. I appreciate you all very much coming on. We can do a couple of questions, but then I'd like to, due to that we're almost a little bit over the 2-hour mark here, I'll go ahead and make sure that you all receive all the questions that we received during the stream. And then if you'd like to, you can follow up on the forum discussion thread that's been posted. I will make sure to post that link for everyone in chat, so that you can head over there. But to move on, one of the viewers was wondering, why is he called Agent 8 when he has 6 legs?
Go on, Nick. Take it away, Nick.
It's nothing to do with the legs. He works for an organization called EP8, Espionage and Protection 8. I think I got that right. And it's a little bit of a joke, but he's got 6 legs and he's called Agent 8.
It's a good one. Someone was curious how many people were, I guess they were wondering how large the animation and code team specifically for the character.
So in terms of code team, that was probably, in terms of overlap, we had one guy on it pretty much solid throughout the development, and that was Nick Edwards, in terms of just taking the spirit of the Blueprint Spyder and just drilling down into the IK problem. And but because the way that our teams were structured, there was overlap with the character team, or the controls team. So you had the likes of Andy Chapman, Andy Brown as well was involved in that. And again, that kind of brought in, because controls and camera work quite closely as well. Sam Royal fed into that conversation. I mean, we had walls and walls of whiteboards, some of which we've got some really good photographs of. But yeah, I mean, that was pretty much the code focus for always one person, but other times bringing in 1 to 2 other people for specific parts of the problem. And
it was the same for art as well. We had Griff, the animator that was on the project pretty much from beginning to end. And then at one stage for, must have been about 2 months, we had support from an animator in Nottingham, Mike. And that was it. And you know, Griff, he wasn't just responsible for the Spyder, he was responsible for all of the animation within the levels, ambient animation of level objects, but also he did the animation of the cameras for the cutscenes as well. So yeah, I mean, it was there was a lot of IK driven stuff, but there was the sort of idols and the animation of the gadget deployment and all of that kind of stuff was all just done by one guy.
And I think there was, I think we mentioned earlier in the talk about some of the limits for bones. And I think, again, throughout the course of that development, some of the guys found a couple of optimizations to increase the bone count in mobile platforms from, I think it was initially, our ceiling was 70, and they got it up to something like 250 or 256. And that's, and again, they're all very collaborative, so they'll submit pull requests to Epic all the time saying, hey, here's an optimization, take a look at this. And there's been quite a bit of that throughout the development as well.
And in terms of design, it was really great that Luke Thurkill, who was one of the Game Jam team, was sort of with us all the way, and he was fundamental in the design-led approach to implementing Agent 8 and the camera.
Quite a few of the questions are, I think you might need to go a little bit more in depth in. So I am going to leave them for the forum announcement post. There's a little bit around the technology of the animation and the IK, as well as sort of some of your production workflows and pipelines leading up, from start throughout and then until shipping. And so I think with that, it's time to wrap up the stream. I appreciate you all very much for coming on. I should mention that, was it Emma and Paul should have been on the stream, but they were unable to make it. So we send our thoughts and wishes out to them. Make sure that y'all are good out there. I'd like to end the stream just playing with a little bit of a mobile sister reel. So if y'all would just stay along and watch that on the Twitch channel, and then we can wrap up the call. And for everyone else out there, we will be streaming again next week. Michael Nolan will come on to show off Game Jam Tips and Tricks Part 2. And so I hope you're all excited to see that. And you all here are, of course, welcome to come and watch that as well if you're interested. Seems like you have been doing quite a bit of game jams internally, though, considering that that's sort of how your process towards making a game, or actually deciding to put a game into production. And so that's very interesting to hear that, the experience that you can get from game jams is actually very real in the industry as well when you're working on bigger teams. And so with that, time to wrap up. This has been fantastic. I hope everyone out there had a good time watching and listening to the team from Sumo Digital. I should mention that we are also working on a technical blog post from your team that should come up at some point. I will make sure to add that if you're watching this VOD a little bit later, hopefully the blog might be out and you'll be able to go ahead and read that. And the team of Sumo Digital are actually doing a little bit of a technical breakdown on a few of the avenues of the game. And so if you're curious about that, make sure that you stay tuned on the UnrealEngine.com news site and blog. All right, with that, I'm going to play the mobile sister reel, and let's all wave a nice little goodbye to everyone who spent the two plus hours watching. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.